You think you know Alien, but John Hurt wasn't supposed to be in it. A 7-foot Nigerian student was discovered in a pub the night before filming. Stanley Kubrick ran the chestburster scene frame by frame and still couldn't find the cut.
It's a lot of construction. This was not a little movie.
The cast thought they were making a scrappy independent film. Today we're exposing 15 hidden truths behind Alien, including why real animal organs were packed inside a fake chest to spray blood at actors who had no idea what was coming. 1. The original Cain collapsed. On the first day of filming, director Ridley Scott had cast John Finch, who'd played Macbeth for Roman Polanski, as the character Cain. On the first day of shooting, during the very first take, Finch collapsed on set. Scott recalled that Finch had gone yellow and couldn't stand up, and they literally had to lift him out of his seat. Finch told Scott he was diabetic and hadn't taken his insulin. He'd also been drinking too much Coca-Cola, which made everything worse. The production ground to a halt immediately. That same night, Scott looked through the casting book and found John Hurt, an actor he'd always admired. Scott drove to Hurt's home in Hampstead that evening. They sat down with a drink, and Scott asked if he wanted the role. Hurt said yes, he trusted Scott. When did he start? Tomorrow morning. A car would pick him up. Just like that, Hurt replaced Finch, and the production had to reshoot all of Finch's scenes from scratch. 2. The cast didn't know about the blood. During the chestburster scene. The rumor that the cast had no idea what would happen during the chestburster scene is partially true. Everyone had read the script, which clearly stated that something would burst out of Cain's chest, but they didn't know the specific graphic details. When the cast arrived on set that day, they noticed something unusual. The crew were all wearing raincoats and ponchos. Transparent screens had been set up around the dining table. These were clues that something messy was about to happen, but nobody put it together. Actress Veronica Cartwright, who played Lambert, had no idea she was about to be sprayed with blood. Her reaction to the blood hitting her face was completely genuine. She was so shocked that she lunged backwards, tripped over a banquette, and flipped onto the floor. Sigourney Weaver said she genuinely thought John Hurt might be dying in front of her, and she only stayed in character because nobody yelled "cut." 3. Stanley Kubrick called Ridley Scott to ask how he did it. About a week after Alien's release in 1979, Stanley Kubrick called Ridley Scott. Kubrick had just seen the movie and was completely baffled by the chestburster scene. He told Scott he'd gotten a print of the film and had been running it on his editing machine over and over, frame by frame. He couldn't see the cut. He couldn't figure out how they'd made it look so real. Scott explained the technique. John Hurt had cut a hole in the dining table and was lying in a horrible, awkward position underneath it. They'd made a fiberglass shell that looked like his chest and screwed it to the table. Kubrick interrupted, saying, "I got it, I got it, I got it. Brilliant." The fact that Stanley Kubrick, the director of 2001, A Space Odyssey, couldn't figure out how the effect was accomplished shows just how revolutionary and realistic it looked. 4. They stuffed the fake chest with real animal organs. The special effects team didn't use fake materials for the chestburster scene. They went to an actual butcher and bought real animal organs. Screenwriter Dan O'Bannon described how they rigged everything up. Once the creature puppet was ready, they stuffed the chest cavity full of organs from the butcher's shop. Then, they ran a couple of big hoses through the fake torso to pump stage blood. They also put a piece of beef organ hanging out of the baby alien's mouth to make it look like it had just eaten its way out. When they triggered the mechanism, the compressed air cannon fired, the chest burst open, blood and guts sprayed everywhere, and the alien puppet was pushed up from under the table. The whole effect was designed to be as viscerally realistic as possible, using real biological materials instead of Hollywood props. 5. The alien was played by a Nigerian student discovered in a pub. Bolaji Badejo was a 26-year-old graphic art student from Nigeria studying in London. One evening, he went out for a drink in a Soho pub. Casting agent Peter Archer happened to be there, searching for someone to play the alien. When Archer saw Badejo, who stood 6 feet 10 inches tall with an impossibly thin frame, he immediately knew he'd found the right person. Archer put Badejo in touch with Ridley Scott. As soon as Badejo walked into the meeting, Scott knew he'd found what he was looking for. Badejo's arms and legs were so long and thin that they seemed nearly inhuman. His proportions would make it look like no human being could possibly be inside the costume. Badejo had 0 acting experience and had never been in a film before. Alien was his only movie role. He never returned for any of the sequels, moving back to Nigeria in 1980, where he eventually opened an art gallery. 6. The alien suit was made of 15 separate pieces. The xenomorph costume that H.R. Giger designed consisted of 10 to 15 separate pieces worn over a one-piece black bodysuit. The bodysuit was necessary to disguise the fact that the alien fitted together in sections. You could actually see through parts of the costume, like the ribcage area, so the black suit underneath prevented audiences from seeing Badejo's skin. Each element of the suit was painstakingly applied before every take, with the head put on last. The suit was incredibly uncomfortable. It was made from latex and became extremely hot inside. Badejo could only wear it for about 15 or 20 minutes at a time before he had to take it off. When he removed the headpiece, his entire head would be soaked with sweat. He was also largely blind inside the suit, with only a few small holes he could look through when standing still. 7. The Nostromo set was only 6 feet. 7 inches high, production designer Michael Seymour deliberately built the Nostromo spaceship sets to be claustrophobic and oppressive. The ceiling height throughout most of the ship was only 6 feet 7 inches. This created a massive problem because Bolaji Badejo, wearing the full alien costume, stood 7 feet tall. He literally could not stand up straight in most of the sets. He had to walk around hunched over, covered in lubricant to make him look slimy, and almost completely blind from the costume headpiece. The low ceilings weren't just uncomfortable for Badejo. They also affected how director Ridley Scott and cinematographer Derek Van Lint could light scenes and position cameras. But that claustrophobic feeling was exactly what Scott wanted. He needed the audience to feel trapped and hunted, just like the crew of the Nostromo. 8. The spacesuits caused actors to pass out from heat. The spacesuits the actors wore during the derelict ship sequences were enormous, heavy, and incredibly hot. The set where they filmed those scenes was kept at 38 degrees Celsius, which is over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Actors wearing those bulky suits would regularly pass out from heat exhaustion. A nurse had to be on hand at all times during filming to revive collapsed cast members. At one point, Ridley Scott even used his own children as stand-ins, putting them in the adult-sized spacesuits to make the space jockey set look bigger. When Scott's kids started passing out too, the production finally made modifications to the costumes to improve ventilation. The suffering was all in service of creating a believable alien environment that looked real and dangerous. 9. The art department budget was $2 million out of Alien's total budget, which started at $4.5 million and eventually grew to around $11 million. Approximately $2 million went to the art department alone. That's an enormous amount for set design and construction in 1979. Production designer Michael Seymour and art directors Les Dilley and Roger Christian built elaborate, fully functional sets. They spent thousands of pounds buying scrap from old jet aircraft engines, automobiles, radios, and television sets. All of that junk was ingeniously repurposed as the electronic equipment and computer systems aboard the Nostromo. The incredibly detailed sets looked so authentic that audiences genuinely believed they were seeing a real, working spacecraft. The attention to detail paid off. The film won the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects. 10. They filmed the chestburster scene. In one morning, despite being one of the most famous scenes in cinema history, The entire chestburster sequence was shot in a single morning. The special effects team had rigged everything the night before. John Hurt was positioned under the table with his head, shoulders, and arms sticking through a hole. The fake torso with the hidden alien puppet was screwed down on top. Hoses were connected to pump blood. Real animal organs were packed inside. When Ridley Scott called action, they triggered the mechanism. Blood sprayed everywhere. Veronica Cartwright got hit in the face and fell backwards. The alien puppet screeched and slithered away on a wheeled dolly. And that was it. The whole scene was done. Tom Skerritt later recalled that one theater owner told Ridley Scott the chestburster scene really messed up our bathrooms because audience members were vomiting and fainting. 11. Sigourney Weaver. Thought it was a scrappy independent film. When Sigourney Weaver signed on to play Ripley, she had no idea Alien would become a massive hit. She thought she was making a scrappy little independent film. The script was good, but nobody expected it to make over $100 million at the box office or win an Oscar. Weaver wasn't a star. Yet, this was essentially her first major film role. Director Ridley Scott deliberately cast actors who weren't household names. He wanted the audience to feel like these were real blue-collar space workers, not glamorous movie stars. That casting strategy worked perfectly. The characters felt authentic and relatable, which made their deaths even more shocking. Nobody knew who would survive because there were no big stars who had to make it to the end credits. 12. Scott filmed Etelstrigis. Days after shooting, wrapped. Ridley Scott and editor Terry Rawlings worked incredibly fast during post-production. Rawlings was editing the film while Scott was still shooting, cutting together footage every night. This meant that just 8 days after filming wrapped in October, they were able to show 20th Century Fox a 2-hour and 22-minute rough cut. The studio executives were stunned. They'd originally budgeted Alien as a $4.5 million film, but when they saw what Scott was creating, they realized they had something special. The budget kept growing, and the release date of May 25th, 1979, became locked in. That tight deadline meant Scott had to work non-stop through post-production to deliver the finished film on time. 13. The tagline was written by the poster designer's wife. The famous tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," has become one of the most iconic lines in movie history. It was written by Barbara Gibbs, the wife of Philip Gibbs, who designed the poster. That simple, terrifying sentence perfectly captured the horror of being hunted by an unstoppable alien creature in the vacuum of space. The tagline appeared on the teaser poster and in trailers, immediately setting the tone for what audiences could expect. It's been parodied countless times since then, but in 1979, it was fresh and genuinely unsettling. The phrase worked because it emphasized the isolation and helplessness that made Alien so terrifying. There's no cavalry coming to save you. Nobody can even hear you die. 14. Bolaji Badejo. Died at age 39. From sickle cell anemia after Alien, Bolaji Badejo returned to Nigeria in 1980 and opened his own art gallery in 1983. He was offered roles in Alien sequels, but he chose to pursue his original career as a visual artist instead. Badejo had been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia as a child, a hereditary blood disorder that's very common among people of African descent. On December 22, 1992, he fell ill and was rushed to St. Stephen Hospital in Ibut Meta, Lagos. He died that same day from complications related to the disease. He was only 39 years old, leaving behind 2 children. Despite appearing in only one film, Badejo's physical performance as the xenomorph created one of the most recognizable and terrifying monsters in cinema history. His contribution to Alien remains part of film legend. 15. Ridley Scott wanted the alien to bite off Ripley's head. Ridley Scott originally conceived a much darker ending for Alien. After Ripley escapes to the shuttle, Narcissus, he wanted the alien to bite off her head and then make the final log entry in her voice, mimicking her perfectly. Scott pitched this terrifying twist to 20th Century Fox executives, thinking it would be the ultimate horror ending. The alien would have won completely, fooling Mission Control into thinking Ripley survived. But the producers immediately vetoed the idea. They believed the alien had to die at the end of the film, and that audiences needed Ripley to survive. Scott had to negotiate just to film the fourth act, where Ripley confronts the creature on the shuttle at all. The studio initially wanted the movie to end with the Nostromo exploding and Ripley safely escaping. Scott convinced them to give him a few extra days and a budget increase to film the final showdown, but his decapitation ending was absolutely off the table. If you made it through all 14 facts, hit subscribe and let me know which behind-the-scenes detail shocked you the most. Was it Kubrick calling Ridley Scott, or the fact that they used real animal organs? See you next time.